We are in the business of leading this college, of giving the student body unforgettable experiences and unparalleled opportunities, of fostering a community we can all rely on. This is student government. This is the King's Council. It takes a village, and we need you. So join us. We're in it together.
All right. Welcome to the Student Body President Debates 2018-2019. Welcome. Thank you for being here with us today. My name is Mike, and I would like to lead us in a word of prayer before we begin. So please bow your heads with me. Dear God, thank you so much for this school that you have given us. Thank you for the chance to be stewards of it. Lord God, I thank you for Elle, Ian, and Brandon. Thank you for their hearts of service and willingness to step up. Lord God, be with them in this next hour and a half and the weeks beyond. Lord, I pray that you would give them strength to pursue your will, to represent the things that you've placed on their hearts well. Give this student body the ability to be gracious towards one another, kind towards one another. Help us to love each other as you have loved us. Lord God, thank you for all of the blessings, all of the gifts and mercies that you give to us each and every day. We do not take them for granted. I pray that you would remind us to never do so. Thank you for everybody in this room and the chance to be here together. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. All right, well, I want to get right into questions as soon as we can, but before we do so, I think one helpful thing that I can do as the current student body president is just to explain a little bit about what the role is and what it is not, very briefly. The student body president has a few jobs. One, to be the leader of the student body, in which I represent your voices to the college administration. That's a huge component of what I do. Just an ear to the ground, try to be in the trenches with you, understanding your interests and your concerns. If you've got concerns this year, I want to hear about them. So let's talk about them so I can represent them well. Secondly, the manager of the King's Cabinet. That's my team, the team of 5 students who help me to lead day-to-day governance of the college, from spiritual life efforts to financial budgeting, to school-wide events, to student orgs, and to communications. And then we also sit on the council, which the student body president is the chair of the King's Council, made up of the 10 House presidents. And the 10 House presidents serve as your representative voice through the House system. And the 16 council members sort of do strategic planning about the current and future governance of the college, submit proposals to create change for student administration, that sort of thing. The student body president cannot sort of snap their fingers and then create a widespread change tomorrow. And really this job is about being in the trenches with people, being a vision caster and making sure that people know where the compass needs to be pointing, but also to be in the trenches to say, all right, well, here's the next step about this. You really have to understand the limits of the institution, the limits of the role, and how to best navigate change collaboratively with as many people as possible in it together. So more about what the scope of the role means will come up, I'm sure, in the scope of this debate, and talk to these guys after the debate too. But at this time, I would like to invite some members of the EST here who have been so helpful in creating questions that are hopefully representative of your guys' voices, because this is where they've come from. So to help explain the questions and also the debate format, I present to you the editor-in-chief of the EST, Jessica Matthews.
How's everybody doing? Everybody excited for some hot debate tonight? Yeah, okay. So I want to go over a little bit about what you're going to be seeing today. So the EST this past week has been gathering questions from all around the student body here, because we want to hear what every single one of you has to say. We want to hear your questions that you have for these guys over here. And so what that's going to look like is we have questions here today that are either directly from students, inspired by students, or questions that have been hot topics on the council for this whole year. So those are the questions you're going to be seeing today. And then a little bit more about the debate format. So the order of how the candidates are going to answer is completely random. But each of the candidates is going to have 90 seconds to answer each question unless we state otherwise. And more about what that looks like is, hold on, I forgot. Okay, so after a 60-second time slot, then the moderators are going to give them, they're going to start a 30-second countdown, After that, they're going to have a 10-second grace period until they move on to the next question. And if a candidate is called out specifically, then they are going to have 30 seconds to respond to it. And then also throughout the debate, we're going to be accepting Twitter questions, so please use this Twitter handle up here and send out your questions so that we can ask them. And then also, I'm going to go ahead and introduce who you're going to be hearing from today. So we have our lovely moderator. So we have Kat Samuelson, who's a sophomore in the House of Barton. And she is the EST weekly editor for the newspaper. And then we have Abina Anim-Sumoa. She's a senior in the House of Truth, and she's a senior broadcast reporter for the Empire State Television. So, yay, Abina. And now for our candidates who you hopefully already know who they are, but in case this is your first time seeing them or knowing that they're running, let me introduce you to them. So first of all, we have Elle Rogers, who's okay, let's try to get through this so we can get to the debate. She is a junior in the House of Margaret Thatcher. And then we have Ian Wilson. He's a junior in the House of Ronald Reagan. And then we have Brandon Smith. He's a junior in the House of none other than Dietrich Bonhoeffer. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and get started.
See you guys.
Yeah, right.
All right. So for all the other questions that we go over, we're going to announce the order as it is each candidate's turn. So I will say, for example, Elle begin, and then when we finish, I'll say, okay, Ian. But for the opening statement, I'm going to go ahead and give the order, and we'd like you to please speak directly following the previous candidate. So first, we're going to have Ian, then Elle, and then Brandon. So Ian, whenever you're ready.
Abraham Lincoln once said that we should not consider whether or not things are evil or good. We should consider whether or not they have more evil than good in them. There are a few things that are wholly good or bad. Likewise, there are a few easy answers to the issues that Kings faces, and it requires humility to admit that we don't have all the answers. My vision is to better our character, our community, and our connection to each other by being in the trenches with you. Our character will be strengthened by recognizing that spiritual life is organic. Meaningful solutions will come from a change of heart, not by adding a new event to the calendar. It is the council's responsibility to facilitate spiritual formation, not to create it. One of the ways in which I want to build community is by capitalizing on the school spirit that our student athletes create. By strategically concentrating our attendance efforts on specific games, we can better support our athletes and normalize attendance at athletic events. As someone that has lived with athletes, cheered for athletes, and competed with athletes, I have a unique ability to represent the athletes. Our connection to each other is largely centered in the housing system, and we need to equip and encourage our leaders in their roles. Specifically, there should be a platform that incentivizes houses to share their best practices in implementable ways. The SBP should be a facilitator and an advocate for the students. Our character, our community, and our connection to each other will drive the school forward in this coming year. I don't have all the answers, and I'm not convinced that all the answers will even be cabinet solutions. But I can listen to you and work with you in the trenches.
2 minutes. Oh.
In 6th grade, I told my mom I was going to go to King's. Through the years, I looked into other colleges, but each time I came back to King's. There's something special about this place, and you feel it in the air right now. I look in my friend's eyes, I look in the mirror, and I see the transformation that's possible here. At King's, we, the student body, build our own framework for living together. I'm before you today because I believe in the power each of us has to shape this community and shape one another for the better. But our picture of community is radically different than the one that existed 5 years ago. We find reason to call King's home and houses, which still frame each of our experiences from the moment we step on campus. In student organizations, 20 of them now, each with its own purpose, and in athletic teams, growing each year. The student body president should empower the cabinet and the council to enable all these places where student life flourishes. And yet our student government is structured to reflect the Kings of 5 years ago. As orgs have grown and begun to shape campus discourse in meaningful ways, they've received little space to actually speak into the issues that shape the campus. As athletes have reached new levels of performance, they've received little support in fighting barriers to academic success and mental health. And houses still bear full responsibility for caring for the community, even as they've doubled in size. We need to define what student government is for the Kings of 2018 and beyond. We have a lack of communication and definition, and it impacts real students facing real problems. Fixing it requires tangible solutions that promote ownership. That includes a council with voting seats for org leaders and athletes, and training programs that equip all student leaders to tackle problems realistically and creatively. This is our school. It belongs to us. No matter our background, race, sexual orientation, skill set, or investment level. Life here isn't always easy, but we always come back to each other. For us, it will always be Kings. We owe it to each other to engage. So let's dive in.
Brandon, 2 minutes.
So I sincerely want to influence the culture of the institution, and I think that this is the best position to do it, which is why I want to serve you in this capacity. I think that the three main areas that we really need to address the culture of our school are regards to Chamberlains and their role, the leadership and the way we structure it, and then spiritual life and the way that we approach it. In regards to Chamberlains, I want to address the community's understanding and the culture surrounding what they're supposed to do. What they're doing is not mentally or emotionally sustainable, it's not healthy for them, and it's not effective for our community. In regards to the leadership structure, I want to focus things back into the houses. I think that the houses and those that are in the houses and the orgs can address these problems in a way that those on the cabinet can't, only because the way we are designed and structured is that we are separated and there's a gap. And we need to make sure that the people who are best equipped to answer these questions are the ones addressing them. In regards to spiritual life, there is no answer right off the bat. It's like Ian said, this is not an easy question to address. But what I will say is that Kings may not always have the answer. We do need to let people know that there's a relationship with God to be had in church that we cannot provide you no matter what answer we come up with. Church can provide a community and responses that we cannot, and as an institution, we need to provide an adequate value to churches. So at the end of the day, I want to change the culture in these ways, and I want to serve you. But most of all, I want to enable you to serve each other in a way that's loving and reflects the real mission of our school. Thank you.
Thank you for your opening statements. We're going to start with the first question. You have 2 minutes to answer this question. As manager of the King's Council, what are your specific and tangible expectations for House presidents and org presidents? Elle, we're going to start with you.
Thanks, Sabina. The council was created in 2007 as a space for communication, coordination, and collaboration among influential leaders in the school. When the council was created, there wasn't communication happening among House presidents or among the houses. That's the reason for the council. We see a similar situation that's happening in 2018. You find different organizations, houses, student orgs, athletics teams, each shaping the community in its own way. But what we lack is a space for leaders in each of these areas to come together and dialogue about the issues that they're facing and share best practices for how we can move forward for those issues. As manager of the council this year, I first want to create a space for House presidents to come and discuss the problems that they're facing. That's something that the council has been lacking in recent years. Meetings have served as mostly a litany of cabinet report updates, as opposed to a space for collaboration and vision casting, problem solving. Now, the next longer-term step is going to be to add voting seats to the council for student org leaders and athletics representatives. Orgs have grown to a level where they're shaping the community just as much as houses do. And athletes are facing issues, they're getting hurt, they're facing barriers to academic success, and those issues never reach the council. We never hear about them. And if we're serious about shaping those areas of Kings, if we're serious about making sure that org leaders are able to shape the discourse that's happening here, then we're going to need to add those seats in the future and make the council a space that really does bring together leaders from all around the different areas of Kings. My role as student body president is not to tell the council, these are the issues, this is how we're going to solve them, but to make sure that all voices are at the table. And I'm giving each party the tools that it needs to have success. in their organization and in the organization of Kings.
Thank you, Al. Brandon, same question.
So I think as student body president, the best thing that I can do is make sure that the people that are at the table know who that they represent and know the best way to acquire the information that they can translate to the council and the cabinet and best represent those behind them. So as a president, obviously I represent my team and I represent my house. So that requires, house meetings, that requires being engaged. If you are in athletics, I think that there needs to be a partnership between athletics and the director of communications. I know that the president of SAC could potentially be an associate to the director of communications, or there could be a partnership. That's a great step in the right direction. I also think that with orgs, I think that there's a committee coming in that the council voted on this year, and it hasn't come into place yet. So whether or not that problem will be addressed, we don't know, because we're not addressing a solution that we put in place that hasn't been activated yet. So at the end of the day, I think that as long as people know who they are intended to represent and know what their job is at the council, they will do the best job that they can. But we need to make sure that those communication outlets are there and available, and we need to make sure that their responsibilities are clear cut, because there is definitely a blur between what the cabinet is responsible for and what the leaders of athletics, the leader of orgs, the leaders of houses, the presidents. There is a distinction that needs to be made between what we are accountable for in our groups and what the school is accountable for providing.
Thank you, Brandon. Sorry, Al, but Ian, we're going to give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things I want to address. Firstly, I think that just on the issue of adding new seats to the council, I think I could see some potential problems with that, which is why I'm hesitant to fully endorse that, because I see that as a way to kind of convolute and kind of fracture the areas of representation that are already in place at the council. So right now you have House presidents, and you could potentially get into a situation where you have a House president who's supposed to represent the president of the King's players, who's representing the King's players, and then it's like, okay, so is the House president representing the president of the King's players, the King's players represented by the House council? It kind of gets all wishy-washy in there. So I think maybe we need to focus instead on just seeing the structures that are already in place, seeing them well, and using them more effectively to communicate between each other instead of just adding new seats to the table without thinking through whether or not this will actually be well. Practically, the things I want to see as manager in my team, I think it'd be really cool if the director of finance went through every single house's house traditions and just started connecting the dots between the funds, the council funds that are in place, and how those could be used for house, retreats or house initiatives, whatever the house is doing, just kind of directly connecting those dots. I think also the director of spiritual life, it'd be really, really cool to see them go to people like Eric Bennett, Dr. Bradley, Dr. Johnson, and get kind of a list of Bible study practices, actual devotional books that have been influential in ways that go beyond just kind of giving an opinion on Scripture, but are actually you're learning something about the nature of God and the nature of your own faith. And so I'd like to see the director of spiritual life kind of build that packet and then give that out to the spiritual life leaders. And I think that there's just a lot of kind of dot connecting in the council, and just kind of, we have all these structures in place, and just having people in the roles to connect the dots with House presidents would be more effective than just adding new seats to the table.
Thank you, Ian. Elle, we're going to give you 30 seconds just to rebuttal on org representation on the council.
The question we're asking is, where does student life happen at King's? Student life still happens in the houses. But we have students who are recruited to play soccer here, and the soccer team is their home. We have students who come and nobody understands them until they go to the King's Players, which Stevie Hernandez runs as a ministry for a lot of people, and that's their home. The council should be representative and reflective of the homes that we have at King's. As Director of Communications, I have taken steps to open up lines of communication. We still don't hear about athletes that are getting hurt. Orgs are not being properly trained. Finances are not being allocated to these groups responsibly, and we could do a lot better.
All right, so our next question is going to have 90 seconds for you guys to respond to. The question is, what is the role of the cabinet as it relates to the council, as it relates to the student body? Brandon, we're going to go ahead and start with you.
Okay. Yeah, so the cabinet relating to the council for me is, it's complicated because every role within the cabinet serves the council in a different way, and it serves the house system and every person in the community in a different way. So if you're the director of student orgs, your relation to the presidents of the houses There definitely needs to be a line of communication there, but you serve with org presidents, you serve with orgs, and that representative role that we're looking for is something that person is going to be best to address. But if you go towards the director of finance, they are financing houses, they're financing orgs. But director of spiritual life, in the director of spiritual life's job description, it talks about influencing Christian community through the house system. So instead of, we have a lot of things on the agenda at King's, and we know this, and these are all wonderful, wonderful things. But at the end of the day, how effective are we being with spiritual life associates? How effective are we being with the spiritual life of houses? Because if that's not the most important thing, then that's okay, we need to adjust that job description. But that position is designed to serve through the houses. So every single position is designed to serve differently, but on the grand scheme of things, I think that making sure you know what positions serve which sex of the community is the first step in efficiently serving everyone that needs to be served.
Thank you, Brandon. And if any candidate needs us to repeat the question, feel free to let us know. But next, Ian, you have 90 seconds.
Yeah, so I think we talked a lot about just being in the trenches, and the cabinet within the council kind of gives the president the ability to be in the trenches with a lot of different groups of students in a lot of different ways, and then kind of all consolidate those into one unified position that we can then collaborate with the House presidents on and kind of reach a conclusion. So I see, what the role of the cabinet is raised to the council. Yeah, so the cabinet is really there to facilitate that, that down-to-earth feeling of being in the trenches with students, actually having a pulse on what's going on in the community as opposed to kind of being removed. Because I think it can be easy to kind of rely either too heavily on just the houses to give you the kind of the thermostat for the community, or to just rely on the orgs or whatever, whether you're doing finance and you're kind of financing houses. You need to have kind of both of those collaborating. So I think that I see those, the cabinet as kind of being a way to get a pulse on the community, but then I think it would also be cool to try to consolidate that position of the cabinet to a quicker time to let House presidents have a little more time to influence the meetings.
Thank you, Ian. All right, Elle, 90 seconds.
Student government is like a house. Stick with it. Students are filling the different rooms of the house, and the kind of rooms change each year. House exec teams, student organization leaders, athletic captains are creating the structure for different rooms of the house. And so those structures will change from year to year in what they look like. The student body president and the cabinet, while by no means the most important parts of the King's community, are at the base of the house, holding it up, and with the cabinet members specifically, holding it up in different areas, and making sure that the processes, the emails, the spreadsheets, the databases, the communications that need to happen in the different areas are going out. So the director of communications, the director of finance, the director of student organizations, the director of spiritual life, and the director of student events are the student body president and the community's boots on the ground, making sure that things go out when they need to go out, and that students are getting plugged in, and that communities are enabled to flourish. Now, as it relates to the council, this is the first point in my platform, to delineate responsibilities between the cabinet and the council. I was 1 month into my role as director of communications when I realized that there's a strong disconnect between what the cabinet ought to do as opposed to what the council ought to do. You find this difficulty especially in our branding. The cabinet runs the council Instagram, but it's TKC Council. And the way I would like to work with House presidents this year to define where those responsibilities, expectations, and roles lie. But the way I see it is that cabinet members each have a kind of responsibility to the House presidents and to other student organization leaders, so that those leaders can be on the ground, creating relationships, changing each other day to day.
Thank you, guys. The next question, you have 30 seconds to respond. Have you promised any cabinet positions? And if yes, what have you promised to him?
council and the cabinet should review them. It just means that different orgs are going to need different things. I'm creating one universal kind of one size.
Take that next step, and that this is something we should care about for the development of our community. What we also need is a tier stay small. We don't have any kind of process
So there needs to be distinctions made. So we also need, when it comes to representing, most orgs from org presidents that I've spoken to, when they talk about this, they talk about their budget. That's what matters. The budget committee has 5 people: a student body president, director of finance, and 3 presidents. There's 20 orgs right now. That's 4 meetings per person. Yes, my math is right. That's 4 meetings per person, right? So each member of this committee can meet with an org president and represent their budget well at the table. Now, I sympathize with Ian on this when it comes to we can't just add seats. That's not the way that this works, and we need to better work within the system that we have, and we need to figure out how to fix it. However, there is a committee just like that coming into being. So that committee has been structured. Nick created it, and it's fantastic. So I'm not saying that it doesn't need to be adjusted, or that an org, someone else other than the DOSO, should be the representative if you want to. As opposed to offering up other solutions before we've given the solution a try and respect Nick's work that he's done this year.
Thank you, Brandon. Did you have a response?
I'm okay. Thanks.
Okay. Elle, did you want to respond?
I'm sorry, y'all keep talking about my platform. And committees are great. Spiritual Life, the Christian Formation Committee has conducted so many interviews and talked to so many students. But you know what committees can't do? They can't vote. They can't discuss issues in executive session behind closed doors that shape the discourse on the campus and that shape the future of the student body. Stevie Hernandez, Annie Mae Jones, Damaris Perry have every much a say in where the campus is going as much as Philip Reeves, Anna Wood, and Kara Simmons, their presidents. And I think it's time that they're all fairly represented.
Thank you.
All right, thank you to the student body for submitting questions over Twitter. This comes from Sarah Stettheimer. What are your ideas for integrating athletics in a way that student athletes actually want? Is simply increasing incentives for game attendance enough? Elle, we're going to start with you. You have 90 seconds.
When I was president of the Publius Society and we would host lectures, when students were forced to come for extra credit, it just wasn't as fun for me to see them there. Now, that said, students should attend athletic events. You want to feel like we go to a real college? Go to a basketball game. But attendance is not the problem. Attendance is a symptom of the problem. We are not a community right now that fully supports student athletes. Last week, I watched Anna Eves get hurt. She had to pay for her own Uber ride to the city med afterwards because the school doesn't have a trainer who can see her consistently. Athletes continue getting hurt. We don't have trainers that can help them get better. They also face barriers to academic success. Debaters face this problem as well because there aren't good absence policies or makeup requirements for athletes. Before we think about what it means to make the student body go to athletic events, we need to think about how we can support student athletes as students. We need the SAC president sitting on the council. The council can discuss and put up a proposal to student development that says you need to make room in your budget for a trainer for athletes. The council can pass proposals to student development that go to academic affairs that say, please don't let athletes fall behind in school simply because they're attending mandatory games. You've decided that athletics and academics are going to coexist and be fully immersed parts of our culture. The council has the power to shape the discourse and shape the way that the school makes policies about athletes, and we're just not tapping into that potential right now.
Thank you, Elle. Ian, you have 90 seconds.
Yeah, so I agree with Elle that it's a heart problem. It's not a structural problem. So adding new structures in place is not really going to be the solution, I don't think. But I do think we can consolidate and better use the structures that are already in place. Right now, there's in the House Cup rules, there's a provision for bonus points for getting a certain amount of your house to attend a specific game. But what I've found leading exec teams, leading on an exec team this year, is that it can be kind of difficult to pinpoint that specific game since the entire calendar is open to you and things get pushed back because stuff comes up and it's just hard to get everyone on board for one thing. I think that by consolidating all of that time for those bonus points into one event that promises a certain amount of points for attending, like the House Futures Comp, where you just have to get a certain amount of your house there and you get, 75 points or whatever. No playing on the exec team's part, trying to figure out how to win, I guess, because it's just attendance. I think that's just a great way to really show our support for athletes. And we could conceivably have a night where we have 200 or 300 students out at a doubleheader for a men and women's soccer game cheering on our people. And I think that's a really good way to support our athletes where they're at right now. One of my only campaign promises too is to give a first aid kit to the girls' soccer team because they need a first aid kit. They shouldn't have to go to the other team for that. So.
Thanks, Ian. Brandon, same question, 90 seconds.
Absolutely. So, as I referenced earlier, I think that the president of SAC could have a formal partnership with the director of communications, and I think that would be a very big step for us because when senior day happened, it was the senior night game, I did not know about it until the day after. And I promise, I looked pretty much everywhere I'm supposed to be looking for it. So we need to do a better job of communicating what needs to be done, but we also need to do a better job of celebrating our athletes. I mean, Anna uses a perfect example. Student, exec team, athlete. Like, I can barely do two of the things, and sometimes barely do one. So she represents this community in a way that's it's so hard for many of us to fathom, but we need to learn how to celebrate these people adequately because they are such a massive part of our community and they're sacrificing and not being appreciated properly. Now, I do want to address Elle's point to the trainer. I like the first aid idea, and I do think that that's something that we definitely need to be intentional about. However, with the trainer, if we can't afford a third counselor, we can't add a trainer because, these are expensive things that we're trying to add, and this money has to come from somewhere. So while I think it's a fantastic idea, until I'm looking at numbers and seeing where that money is going to come from, I can't make that promise. But I do want to proceed cautiously with the discussion because we need to look at what we can actually do to support these athletic programs, as opposed to promise things that would make them great, but at the end of the day, we can't fulfill.
Great. Thank you, Brandon.
All right, so our next question is also going to be 90 seconds. Are members of the House exec teams asked too much? Is there a need for changes to House exec teams? Brandon, we're going to go ahead and start with you.
Okay, so, yes. I think the big one is Chamberlain, and I think everyone else agrees with me on that. There's no way that we can ask students to fulfill what we're asking Chamberlains to do. And at the end of the day, it may not necessarily be a problem with the job description, and I'm okay bowing out of that. I mean, they have to facilitate one-on-ones, community meals, honor talks, and if you think that that's okay, try to do it. But there's a lot on their plate there. And the thing is that even if those are acceptable things to ask a student, one, can they do it? Two, are they going to be the best person to do it? Yeah. And I don't know that any student can do that as well as a trained counselor or even a professional in student life. I don't think that they can do that. So at the end of the day, that leaves you with a gap. Who's going to fulfill this? And I do want to try, I want to push for a counselor. I want to try to alleviate the emotional support role from the Chamberlain and add a counselor. But what we do need to do as a community is recognize what they're actually here for. What they are is an arrow. When you speak to them, they will point you to the best resource to help you. They are not that resource in and of themselves, and it's harmful to them and to the community to access it.
Thank you, Brandon. Ian?
Okay, so there's a few things. I think that I agree with a lot of what Brandon said. I think that there is a ton of responsibility placed on student leaders within the community. But I think I kind of see it as being something that's unequally yoked. There are some houses that have a ton of responsibility in that position, some houses don't, and it's just kind of more of an experiential thing. So I think I'm kind of wary of this like one-size-fits-all answer to it, and that's why I say that there's not easy answers to these questions. We kind of have to wrestle with them. I do think that having some meetings for Chamberlains and stuff that aren't these like mandatory, obligatory, let's go build you up on how to be a better Chamberlain, let's just decompress how this week went for you and stuff, would be really, really beneficial. Because right now you could potentially have a meeting with your house exec team, a meeting with your house president one-on-one, a meeting with your house advisor one-on-one, a meeting with your associates, you have a meeting, any other meeting in terms of like honor code stuff, haven't done in weeks. You just need some time to just decompress and just relax. So I think that could be a huge thing in just providing support for the executive teams within the houses.
Thank you, Ian. Elle, you have 90 seconds.
When the house system was created in 2003, the four-person exec team structure made sense. Houses were 20 people. Our student body was half as large. That doesn't make sense anymore. Exec team still makes sense. I was a scholar last year for the House of Thatcher. It was an amazing experience. All three of us up here can speak to that. But as our student body has doubled in size, and as students have found their homes in the houses, but also in places other than the houses, we still place the full burden of caring for our community upon the shoulders of 4 20-year-olds on exec teams, and that is unacceptable. Now, the question we then have to ask ourselves is, what is the ownership of the student body president to change that culture? The student body president does not have the authority to change job descriptions or anything relating to exec team positions. That is student development's owner authority and the people who are in those positions themselves. The positions will all change their job descriptions. Will have the opportunity to change their job descriptions in a few weeks. And based on the conversations happening now, I'm sure they'll have a lot of edits. The student body president does have ownership to provide better training to other parts of the community. Because unless we accept that there are other legitimate ways to lead and serve the community, Chamberlains will continue to be overworked. Unless we recognize that an org leader of a 10-person book club might have just as much right to speak into the life of a student struggling with honor as that person's Chamberlain, and unless we properly equip those org leaders to have those conversations, to point people to resources,
that I want to be able to cast a vision for and facilitate, but that's also something that I can't personally speak to. So I think it's about equipping and empowering the leaders within the community who are speaking into that and who are having those conversations, who see the action steps that need to be taken, letting them have a voice, letting them have some of the direction. And just, I think sometimes the best thing you can do as a leader in this community is to just sit back and listen to the ideas of what's happening in the student body. And that's something that I will strive to bring as student body president.
Can be discouraging to minority students that I've spoke to. So we need to what it means to and we need to encourage this, and I think bringing people from outside of our community that are willing to speak on this and that are passionate about it is a great tangible way to keep moving forward.
Thank you, Brandon. Al, same question.
Over the past year, we have taken steps in the right direction. The creation of the table, last year's difficult discussion on race, showed us that here on this campus we could have productive conversations about systemic race issues that face the nation, our culture, and specifically the King's College. Since then, we've seen progress. Churchill, last year you guys hosted Dr. Bradley for a discussion on equality. And last night, Celebramus Cultura, Holly Kemp's org, celebrated different cultures and encouraging people of all cultures and all backgrounds to celebrate what's happening around the world and what has happened. But we still have a problem. We have African American students, Asian American students, and Hispanic students who don't feel at home on this campus. And honestly, the rest of us need to catch up to the groups who have taken steps forward. The table should not be the only place where conversations on minority representation are happening. You know what? Statesmanship is entirely white. The cabinet is entirely white. And honestly, steps that we can take to address the problem, if you provide more resources for leaders, if you broaden the apparatus of what it means to be a leader at King's, you put more student leaders in statesmanship, you open up cabinet application processes to the whole student body, you make more people represented on the council, you have a higher statistical probability that you will see minority students of all backgrounds, of all shapes and sizes, of all sexual orientations in leadership, and that is something that we should strive for.
All right, our next question is also going to have 90 seconds. Because of our structure as a Christian college, many in the LGBTQ community feel unsupported at an institutional level. For example, the LGBTQ group is unable to become an official student organization. What can be done to better recognize and support this community at King's while also staying within and respecting the confines of this institution? Brandon, we'll start with you.
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, our role as a Christian institution is to love those people, and I think that we fail to do that frequently. I think that we need to more actively love them and more actively give them that platform to speak. We talk about representation, well, they need to be represented as well. Like, we need to give people the chance to speak. And there needs to be less, I've heard people have discussions with them and condemn their actions and condemn why they're doing what they're doing, or condemn their role here at a Christian institution, and that is not our place. That is not what we are here to do. We're here to love them and show them the love of Christ and try to go through this journey with them. Point them to the people that can answer whatever questions they may have and listen to what they have to say. I feel like we neglect to do that because everyone at King's thinks we know everything, and that can be harmful to us. We need to be willing to learn and to listen, and I think that that's a big step we can take.
Thank you, Brandon. Ian, you have 90 seconds.
Yeah, so I think one of the practical things we could do to kind of start to promote a healthy culture that supports that community is to just kind of change our vision for spiritual life groups from a strictly Christian spiritual life group to also having groups within the houses that could support kind of a more open spiritual life group. Because that's something that, just from the conversations I've had, is kind of lacking in that community. They sense this need for, we need to be connected to some spiritual things, even if it's not strictly God stuff, but just spiritual things. There's a spiritual element in all of us. And so just kind of increasing the resources for, hey, how can we have a discussion within the house, within the people around you that's just kind of more localized and more open to people coming in, while at the same time having maybe a separate discussion for those among us who kind of want to move more towards, digging into what it means to be a Christian and stuff like that, but try to have some more openings for people to come in to participate in the spiritual life at King's and to not just funnel them all through a certain track.
Thank you, Ian. Elle?
I came from a Midwest homeschool evangelical family. Interacting with people who are different than me, like even people who listen to Lady Gaga, was definitely not part of the equation. And I was the high school freshman who judged people in my youth group for listening to Lady Gaga. And you know what softened my heart? It was coming here and interacting with people in the LGBTQ community. They have turned my heart from a heart of flesh, from a heart of stone into a heart of flesh, and I am so grateful. I'm also grateful that we go to a Christian college where the vice president of student development can meet with 20 students who do not identify as straight and talk to them about what it means to walk that out in accordance with their faith and with their sexual and gender orientation. We're getting to a point, though, where we're either going to officially recognize that people like that exist and are fully immersed members of our community and have every bit of stake in what happens to it as the rest of us do, or we're going to reject it, and that's going to be even more problematic. We can take small incremental steps to see that that recognition occurs. One thing I'm really excited about is the creation of a kind of student organization tier system so that we can distinguish large student organizations from small student organizations or clubs. And this will take liaising with the administration, but benefits would be dispersed, and that opens up the possibility that we could see something like recognition of the LGBTQ group here on campus able to reserve a room so they don't have to meet off campus. I'd also like my Director of Student Organizations and Director of Finance to work to identify external funding sources so that leaders of the group can purchase food for their meetings. There's a lot more we can do to support them.
Thank you all. We have another Twitter question for you guys. This one is from Caitlin Hasagawa. No one has a monopoly on good ideas. What is the strongest element of your opponent's platform that you don't currently have that you would implement it if elected? Ian, we're going to start with you. You have 90 seconds.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm most passionate about, just because I'm closest to it, is actually from Brandon's platform. And it's kind of the emphasis on trying to support Chamberlains in the best way possible, just because I see kind of the amount of stuff we have on our calendar is a really big problem at Kings, and it kind of builds us up into this really busy people that have a lot of stuff going on, and it's hard to kind of find the right incentives to go to the right things. And so I think I see kind of supporting exec teams in the right way, a way to kind of give leaders in this community the right footing to move forward in how they lead the community.
Great. Thank you, Ian. Elle?
To join the chorus, I think Brandon has really identified something important, and that certain student leaders do bear too much responsibility and too much of the burden in providing resources for the community. And that's something that we ought to talk about. But I do think it's important to talk about it in the right way. So Brandon has said that we need new definitions for what it means to lead at Kings. Absolutely. And I think we can take the core of that idea and broaden it, so that we're not just talking about the Chamberlain role anymore, but we're talking about equipping org leaders to have the kind of conversations that Chamberlains have, because we're at a point where that's happening. It also comes down to talking about what it means for exec teams to function more as resource connectors for students, rather than just carers for students' mental health and other issues that 20-year-olds should never be expected to care for. I wrote a succession planning guide on the student portal about the role of Scholar as more of a resource builder and connector than somebody who cares for students' grades, and I'd love to talk to you about what that could look like for other positions.
Thank you all. Brandon?
Yeah, so anyone who knows Elle knows that Elle loves communication. And I think that she's onto something there. I talk about this relationship between SAC and the Director of Communication with advertising athletics and making sure that those people are represented, and not only that, but they are celebrated. And I do think that she's on the right track there. I do think that there are disagreements with the structure of where that communication goes and what happens after that and what else needs to happen. However, I do think that fundamentally, getting the right people into the correct discussions is a huge part of that, and I think she recognizes that well.
All right, thank you. Our last question before closing statements is also 90 seconds. Do you believe that Kings struggles with a culture of competition and perfectionism? As SBP, how would you think about achievement and success in your role? Elle, we're going to start with you.
Oh my goodness, I came to Kings and I was determined to be the best. I wanted the best internships, the best positions, the best roles. I wanted to be the best. And honestly, it was living in community with other people, and it was forcing myself to sit outside the library and have conversations with the people who passed me by as I did my homework. It showed me that Kings is amazing because we are not all pointed at the same goal. Like, I promise you, we are not all trying to get the same job. I mean, the three of us are right now, but in the long run, and the beautiful thing is that we get to help each other out. We're all in our own races, and we get to run alongside each other. That's a really beautiful thing. The way that student government is structured right now, I think, does create that culture of competition. Those of us in statesmanship carry around our Statesmanship Institute water bottles, and it's like a seal that says, I've been trained and you haven't. I serve the community and you don't in as legitimate a way. And there are steps that we can take to change that. We are in a time when it's no longer enough to say that House exec teams are the only roles that shape Kings. Associates need training. Org leaders need support. Athletes need recognition and support that goes beyond just attendance at their games. These are all different parts of Kings. We have 20 student orgs that each has a wildly different mission. And you know what they do? They partner with each other. They support each other. The Kings players and Dela partnered last semester to host It's a Wonderful Life. We should see more of that so that we're helping each other and going towards our goals. And as student body president, I'm excited to work with a cabinet and a council representative of different voices in the conversation.
Thank you, Elle. Brandon, you have 90 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I only carry my water bottle because it's free, by the way. When it comes to perfectionism, if you guys read the ESD article, I'd been to 2 honor councils. That's not true, but I have been honor coded twice as a freshman. My GPA is not amazing, okay? I am not a perfect student. I am not a perfect student. As a president, I am not perfect, and I witness things every day that are not perfect. But the thing is that you learn to love this. You learn to love the community you're in, and you learn why we do what we do. I've seen the honor code executed poorly and really well, and I know that why we have it. I've been involved in so many things here, and I'm involved in leadership. I'm involved as a student. And at one point, I was involved with athletics, but, here I am. I'm not anymore. Because it was too hard. So, the point is that, you can be involved with as much as you want, but every student has to prioritize what do you want to excel in. What Kings does is offer you 10 different things and says, okay, go do it. And our instinct is, I have to be the best at all 10 of these things. And that's not the point. But it's also not the point to cut any of those things away. What we need to do is foster a community that says, hey, here's 10 options. Do what appeals to you. Do what you love. And go do what you're going to do. Go succeed. Go try to excel at what you love to do. And make sure that you're not trying to please other people's standards and the other things you don't want to participate in. That is your right to prioritize.
Thank you, Brandon. Ian, you have 90 seconds.
I lost my water bottle, so maybe that tells you everything you need to know about candidates. I think, we do have this culture of cynicism. We have this culture of peer competition where it makes it really hard to cheer for the people around us, because every time someone else gets a cool internship, that makes me feel like I have to have a cool internship, and if I don't have a cool internship, they shouldn't have a cool internship either. And so there's this competition where we can't cheer for each other because we have to constantly tear each other down. And so what I think it's important to do is to promote a community that celebrates the success of our peers and recognizes that people are doing amazingly cool things at the school, but that not everyone has to do those amazingly cool things. The most strategic institution you could ever influence is the family. So why can't we focus and emphasize that as a way of having success here at the King's College? I think it's really important too to just recognize that, like Brandon said, we have so many things in front of us. And if we have so many things in front of us, it's always going to be an incentives game where we're just choosing what's going to give us the best lunch over the lunch hour as opposed to doing what's actually good for us. So you need to focus on the things that are actually going to cultivate you as a person and develop you into a person. As a student here at King's, I've pressed into this community because I've seen it as something valuable to be a part of as opposed to trying to just spread my network out into New York City. I've been in admissions. I've had to sell the school right after I bombed a microeconomics exam. And let me tell you something, you learn exactly what you love about the school when you have to tell someone why they should come to King's in light of that.
Thank you, Ian.
All right, so this is your final closing statement. You have 90 seconds to sum everything up. Elle, we're going to start with you.
King's is an institution that I love. But I'm here, running for student body president, because I made the choice to love this place. I came to school after being bullied in high school, hoping for a fresh start. That didn't happen immediately. Freshman year was rough, and I can't tell you how many nights I sat crying against the wall wanting to transfer out. What kept me here were the people, most of them here in this room, who loved me in my moments of deepest hurt and waited for me when all I could see was my own ambition. I hurt you, and you hurt me. And you became my people, and you became my home. And I'm here because you taught me that I could love you well. My hope and my dream is that we would teach that love to everyone who steps foot on this campus. In our uglier moments, we content ourselves with a structure that restricts belonging to a mold or reserves belonging for those who can win a House election. We create judgments about one another that go unaddressed. And we fail to champion causes and people that deserve our full support. And Kings, it's time to stop being content. Our greatest gift is each other, and we miss that every day. We fail to get involved, as Dr. Blander would say, in the shit of each other's lives because it's easier not to do anything and tell our friends about it. Student government isn't here to solve all our problems, but it is here to enable our life together. Instead of making our community fit an outdated mold, let's adapt our mold to a changing community. Because this is our school, and we belong to each other. We have before us the resources to build something new that brings houses, orgs, athletics, all of us together on this campus to shape the Kings that we know and love for ourselves and for the future.
Thank you. Ian, your closing statement.
Yeah, I think that the SBP should be a facilitator and an advocate for students. You have to have someone that's willing to connect the dots for students and get them plugged into where they need to be. A lot of the changes in this community that we're asking for in terms of spiritual life and in terms of the heart of service and everything else, a lot of those are going to come from heart changes, from individuals like you actually going out and making a difference in this community. They're not going to come from the council and the cabinet, and it is our role to facilitate those. So I think that you need to elect someone and put someone in that role that can facilitate that can represent as many interests as possible, and can build a team that further represents and supports those people around them. Listen, I think that it's the most important thing is to be in the trenches with people and actually have a pulse on what's going on in this community. And if you're in the cabinet, it can be really hard to be removed from that, and that's why I think the SBP role should be recast from this cabinet-only role to kind of being someone who's in the trenches with you, working around and trying to build a better community with you guys.
Thank you, Ian. Brandon, your closing statement.
So as a community, since you've been here, but most importantly this past year, you've been excited, you've been happy about the growth of orgs and the other things that we're doing, and you've also been frustrated, you've been heartbroken. And not only have I witnessed those things in my houses, but I've felt those alongside of you and felt responsible for the way that my men felt. I understand what it's like to experience these things in the same way that you all do, and that's why I'm running for this position. There's something on the line here that's more important than efficiency, and at times even more than representation. When I talk about the Chamberlains, this is the mental and emotional well-being of them, as well as other people in this community that are at stake. This is something beyond us. This is something bigger than the actual discussions being had in these platforms. So I understand that, yes, it's not in my power to rewrite that job description, but what it is in my power to do is advocate like hell. And I am, Nick Swedick, he's been a role model for me. Josh Heinen's one of my best friends, 2 people on Student Life. These are people that I will fight, I will go and I will battle for you guys for. I will fight for this because this is something I care for. This is something that's deeply rooted in my heart, and that's why I'm here. The other stuff I'm capable of. I've led a house. I know how to manage. I know how to delegate, and I know how to set a vision. But this is it's about more than that, and I want to represent that, and I want to serve you, and I hope you'll allow me to.
All right, can we give all 3 of these guys a round of applause? Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much to all of you who tweeted questions, who submitted questions to the EST. Thank you so much to the EST team led by Jess. These questions were phenomenal. I hope that they resonated with you because they came from you. Guys, we have the SBPB ANA on Thursday, hosted by Nate Rizzuti and Hank Janelle. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be great, and have a chance to watch these guys have some fun. I'm so thankful to be a part of this community. Continue to engage. You guys, if you asked a question on Twitter and didn't get it answered, talk to them, demand an answer, figure out how you can engage in this community through your questions, and have a great class. Have a great week. We'll see you later.